Good morning friends, welcome back to my channel Mr. Bright. My name is Pranay Jadhav and today I am back again to with a new concept that what is the difference between brass and bronze. Generally the names are similar, which means they are quite rhyming and nearly same, but the difference between them are very vast. Okay, so let's begin. We are going to start the difference between brass and bronze. So the first brass and another one is bronze. So what is the difference between brass and bronze? Generally the first type of difference between brass and bronze is the brass is a type of metal which is an composition of copper and zinc, and zinc is considered as an alloy. So the first thing is that brass is an composition of copper and zinc. Generally for your information that the composition of which means the major content of metal is known as parent metal, and the minor content of metal is known as alloying element. So the parent metal between both of these, which means brass and bronze, are same, which means brass contains the parent metal which is copper, and bronze also contains parent metal which is also known as copper. So we have discussed that brass contains copper, which means contents of copper and zinc, which means combination of two metals of copper and zinc is known as brass, whereas the combination of copper and tin is called as bronze. Okay, the combination of copper and tin is called as bronze. Then another thing, which means another difference is that brass is quite harder as compared to bronze, which means brass is harder, has a property that it is harder as compared to bronze, and it is less harder as compared to brass. Okay, hence as brass is harder as than bronze, it is used for hardware equipment, which means for producing hardware equipments, and bronze is generally not used for it because it has not the ability to withstand that hardness or such a properties. So another thing, which means another difference is, third difference is that it has less corrosion resistance, which means the brass contains high hardness, but it has less property as compared to bronze, and that less property is corrosion resistance. Generally brass didn't have well corrosion resistance property, but bronze has well corrosion resistance property as compared to brass. So the third property is less corrosion resistance, which states that it has less corrosion resistance as compared to bronze, and it has high corrosion resistance as compared to. Okay, so fourth difference is that which means it is not a difference. Now we are going to discuss about classification. So brass is classified into two groups, which is alpha brass and alpha plus beta brass, and bronze is classified into three types, which are tin bronze, aluminum bronze, and phosphorus bronze. So we were discussing about classification, we are going to talk about that thing, and the thing is that brass. Okay, brass is a metal which contains a single phase metal, whereas bronze is not a metal which has any type of single phase. It has a phase which is more than single. Okay, so brass is only a metal which has single phase, which means alpha phase. Brass has alpha phase, which is single phase, whereas it has no single phase, has no single phase. Okay, now another thing is we are going to discuss about classification. So classification is a fifth difference, that brass is classified into two groups, which is alpha brass and another one is beta brass. So alpha brass is generally the combination of 20 to 30%, which means the combination of 30 near about 36% of zinc in copper is called as alpha brass. So which states that 36% of zinc and remaining percent of copper are combined together and forms and brass, and which is alpha brass. Generally alpha brass varies from 5% to 26% or 36%. Okay, so alpha brass contains if alpha brass contains 5 to 20% of copper, no sorry, 5 to 20% of zinc, then the brass gives a reddish color, and that reddish color states that the brass is reddish brass. And when it contains increases, which means when zinc content, we will increase zinc content of in brass, which means we will increase the content from 20 to 36%, it will give a yellowish color, and it will state that the copper the brass is in yellow color, and it is also known as yellow brass. Generally bronze is also in color of yellow, but it matches, generally it matches gold color as compared to gold. Okay, so for alpha brass has property. Alpha brass is also further divided into two parts, which is cartridge brass, and another one is admiral brass. Alpha brass is different, it will write that 36, near about 36 0 to 36% of zinc and remaining copper, which means alpha brass contains 0 to 36% of zinc and remaining percent is copper. Okay, after it we will take it not 0, we will take 5. After it we are going to discuss about types of alpha brass. Alpha brass is further classified into two types, which is alpha brass are further subclassified into two types, which are cartridge brass, and another one is admiral brass. Now, what is the difference between cartridge brass and admiral brass? Generally, the difference is negligible difference between them. Only a cartridge brass contains 30% of copper, 30% of zinc, and 70% of copper, which gives high properties like hardness, strength, and etc., and many things. And it has a good hardenability also. It is used for radiator fins and cases, making rivets and etc. But in admiral brass we are going to add 1% of tin in admiral brass, which means we will give content amount that, so we will add 70% of copper, 1% of tin, and remaining percent, which means 29% of zinc. Or we will change the content, for example we will add 69% of copper, 1% of tin, and remaining content will be of zinc. So it will increase the corrosion resistant property as well. It will increase the mechanical properties also, and it will be important for everything. And due to this due to addition of tin, it is also used for marine applications also, So now the further classification or further explanation is about alpha brass, alpha plus beta brass. So alpha plus beta brass contains 32 to 40% of zinc, which tells us that alpha plus beta brass contains more content of zinc as compared to alpha brass. So 30 to 42% of zinc, during adding this content, its hardness and strength as compared to alpha brass becomes less. Okay, so its corrosion resistance property also decreases as compared to alpha brass, and it has two phases, for example alpha brass and beta brass. So its two phases are alpha and beta phase. Okay, so alpha and beta brass is also further classified into three groups. So the groups are Muncie metal, naval brass, and another one is brazing brass. So alpha plus beta brass are further classified into first Muncie metal, another one is naval brass and navy brass, and third one is brazing brass. So general composition of this thing is also common, that Moon's metal contains 40 to 60%, which means 40 to 60 composition, which tells us that it contains 60% of copper and 40% of zinc, which gives well mechanical properties as well chemical properties. And due to its well mechanical properties, it is used for making nut and bolts and pump impellers and etc. And in naval brass we are adding, which means we have, as we have done changes in admiral and cartridge, same changes are done between Moon's metal and naval brass. The changes are that in Moon's metal we have 60-40 composition. In naval brass we will change the composition by adding 1% of tin, which means again we will change the we will remove 1% from either 60% or either from 40%, and we will add 1% of tin in it to increase the corrosion resistance property. Due to this increase in corrosion resistance property and high mechanical properties, it is used for marine applications, and it is also used for making fans of ships, which fans of ships. Okay, so another next explanation is about bracing brass, which is also an example of alpha plus beta brass. The example states that it contains 50 to 50 composition of copper and zinc. Due to this composition, the brittleness of metal increases very highly. Okay, due to increasing this brittleness property, the ability of material to withstand hardness, the mechanical properties generally decreases. For example, ductility, malleability, and many other properties gets decreased, and due to which it is not the metal is not important for many applications, and it will not withstand generally many types of forces. So it is not used for many applications, but it is used for some applications, and they are very pretty in quantity. Okay, next explanation is about, now we are going to jump on bronze. We have completed about brass, and the overview is that it has composition of copper and zinc. It has a property that it is harder, and it has less corrosion properties. The classifications of brass is alpha brass and alpha plus beta brass. Brass contains only alpha phase, which is single phase, and many other things. And now bronze. Before starting bronze classification, we are going to overview that combination of copper and tin forms bronze. It is generally in golden in color, and it is less harder. It has high corrosion resistance property, and it has no single phase. Okay, so its classification. Let's start classification. So classification of bronze is tin bronze. Another one is aluminum bronze, and the third one is phosphorus, which means phosphor bronze. Okay, so the bronze, which means tin bronze, generally we add tin in higher quantity as compared to brass. We add 1% of tin in brass. In this we are going to add 8 to 12 or 12 to 20% of tin in the metal, which will increase corrosion resistance property, mechanical properties, and many other properties, due to which the tin bronze is precious thing, which means precious metal we use for many compositions and many for many applications, such as if we add 8% of tin in copper, it will form a precious bronze, which is used to make sheets, wires, and coins. And another thing is that if we add if we will increase the quantity of tin in copper, which means we will add 8 to 12% of tin in copper, so it will form we will use it for machine, which means we will use for making marine applications or marine compositions. Because of the corrosion resistance property has increased at high quantity, it has high mechanical properties and various types of chemical properties also. So another thing is another explanation is about phosphor. So phosphor is similar to tin bronze. Okay, as I have told that we are going to add 8 to 12% of, which means approximately 8 to 12% of tin, and in phosphor we are going to add similar amount of tin and copper, but we are going to decrease, which means we are going to add one more content, and that content is known as phosphor. The quantity of phosphor, is from 0.025 to 0.3, which means 0.3 to 0.025%. And it is, as we think that it is a quite small in amount, but it gives vast changes in mechanical properties, which means properties of the metal. Okay. Due to addition of phosphor, it has excellent casting properties. It changes the ability of a material, that it gives excellent casting property for a metal after adding in phosphor. Another explanation is about aluminum rods contains 5 to 12% of aluminum in and copper, which gives precious amount of aluminum, which is as compatible, means it is similar and compatible with steel. It has ability to withstand high forces, high strength, and it is also light in weight as compared to steel, and it has highly demand in our day-to-day life. It is used in many applications. For example, we are going to use it in airplanes, in many engines, engine components, engine covers. We are now in current technology, we are going to discuss, we are going to add, which means we are going to make vehicles of aluminium, from aluminium, and many other things we are going to make from aluminiums. And aluminium is an important thing as compared to steel, and in our day-to-day life, its ability or its important is increasing. So aluminum is an important metal from the composition, or rather from sub property of subtype of bronze. So this is the difference between brass and bronze. You should know the basic point that the brass has content, which means composition of copper and zinc, but bronze has composition of copper and tin. This is an important point, that it is the main difference between copper and zinc, and copper and tin, that brass contains copper and zinc, and bronze contains the composition of copper and tin. So we will stop here. If you like the video, please like and subscribe the video, and thanks for watching video until the end. Bye.